Alright, ladies and gentlemen, WarThunder Sons of Attila major update is now officially out, so I think it is a good time to tackle the subject. But first of all, let us thank Gaijin for their 10 years of support for this game. When I started playing WarThunder more than 10 years ago, I never even dreamt of this game growing into what it is today. The game has come a long way both mechanically and visually. It is a much more refined, realistic and visually stunning experience in this day and age. And as much as me and others like to complain about bad decisions that Gaijin took over the years, it is our obligation as well to give credit where it's due. So kudos to Gaijin for giving us truly the best realistic vehicle or combat game out there. And respect to them for making it better and better with each update. I wish there was no need for negative action from the community's side, but sometimes even the most virtuous of us need a little bit of policing and enforcement, and a snail by no means falls under the virtuous category. So enough sweet talking, as there are still many problems to solve. It's been quite some time since the MiG-29 and F-16 were out. They both started very strongly with their radar missiles. And since the majority of popular nations got either of these planes, players were mostly happy. Because if there are multiple power creeps in a BR range, people don't really complain, right? Like for example, when there was only F-14 as a sole contender of the top tier, Russian and Germany players were constantly complaining. So it was a good move from Gaijin's side to release MiG-29 and F-16 at the same time. But still there was something wrong. Because of the way radar missiles work with the advanced pulse Doppler radars, the matches were much more mundane. There was almost no way to counter the very fast, very agile and accurate radar missiles. So essentially whoever shot the first missile in a 1 vs 1 situation would be without a doubt the winner of the encounter. Then an update rolled out. Radar missiles were not as accurate as they used to be. It could easily be countered by going in a low pass maneuver. And the problem, or rather the change, wasn't only specific to pulse Doppler radars. It was consistent even on earlier MTI radars of the Russian and Italian aircrafts. In this case, the only way you could engage people were either try to catch them off guard in a high altitude, or you yourself taking the risk of climbing higher than them and shoot your missiles in a downward 45+ degree angle. This way radar would track much more accurately. And the closer you would get to an upwards angle, the more chance of hitting your target. Some of you complained about these changes, even some of my friends were on the same page. But the problem is if there is no counter to radar missiles, the outcome of a balanced game would be jeopardized. Imagine every single plane in the match having an advanced radar and the players having an equal amount of skill and knowledge about their planes. The outcome would definitely lean towards the planes with longer range and faster missiles. So I genuinely think that in the grander scheme of things, it was a positive change. But with that drastic change and a nerf to M9L missiles, which were at the time and perhaps even now the backbone of close combat engagements in WarThunder for the majority of planes, drove the game into an even more mundane and boring state. The matches would start and there was nobody climbing except for the F-14s trying to shoot their phoenixes. The laughable furball effect that was previously present in 9.7 to 10.7 BR range somehow made its way into the top tier again. And the maps didn't really help either. Maps like City contribute nothing to the game except for making it a laughingstock among other realistic games. Now some people might argue that no, WarThunder is not a simulator. The emphasis is obviously on fun and a fair combination of fun, arcadey gameplay and realism. And that's true, I'm not arguing with that. It's just the fact that the higher the tier of your plane, the more distorted the line of arcade and realism gets. And I don't know about you, but I'm starting to notice that there is a reason why arcade mode is basically a vacancy in high to top tier BR ranges. Arcade players find home in realistic battles when it gets to high and top tier. Now part of it can be the fact that nobody wants to get spammed by missiles, since in arcade mode you have the ability to reload your missiles while airborne. But no, it's simply because realistic battles right now resemble arcade battles much better than the arcade battles themselves. Which leads us to the first problem that we want to talk about. WarThunder was always aiming for the perfect middle ground of realism and fun, at least in case of realistic battles, and I'm sure the majority of you are on the same page with me. WarThunder takes this actually realistic and at times even one-to-one simulation approach and downscales it into a very much accessible and simple mechanics. The results seem almost real, but the process for sure is a much more downscaled and minimized version of reality. But the problem starts when we intentionally make maps smaller, or even in the case of some of the larger maps, we put the objectives in a saturated circle in the center of the map. I mean, last year I thought with myself that Gaijin would eventually force the enduring confrontation maps for the BBR top tier. But here we are, still treating top tier like it's an early Jets gameplay. Instead of putting more space between the objectives, perhaps giving some bombers and strike aircrafts a frontline spawn point, and somehow try to give more meaning to the EC map objectives and put more pressure and ticket punishment for failing those objectives, we rather put a legion of players on either side and let them smack each other around like it's an Unreal tournament match. But Gaijin strikes again. For whatever reason, either trying to save up servers or make an already quick matchmaking even more quicker, Gaijin decided to increase the player count to 32 players. Some of you didn't even notice the bump in the player count, and some of you noticed but simply didn't give two fucks about it. But the reality is this is not beneficial for the quality of the matches or even the progression of the players, and ultimately will make the top tier experience a boring and bland mixture. Sure, the furball effect is always happening and there is a lot of action, but come on, What is the point of having new content when the gameplay is like a little cockroach nest? What is the point of having a detailed radar warning receiver when it's about to get bombarded by signals from all across the map? The current format leaves no place for creativity of playstyle and demands the players to stay low and remain on the side skirts to avoid the clusterfuck that is going on in the middle of the map. But I dare you to take this to WarThunder forums or Reddit and watch the player base do their magic of pure gaslighting, ignorance and surface level takes, which points us to the biggest problem of WarThunder's top tier experience, the player base.
I gotta say, your line of questioning is starting to annoy me.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I just, I thought I was gonna see a car on land.
Are you being cute right now?
No.
Is that what's happening?
I'm not being cute.
And no sale, how about that? Because you don't deserve the car. The car has spoken, I have spoken. You obviously don't get what's happening here, so be gone with you.
It's obviously foolish to blame everything on a player base. Because who in the right mind would blame the consumers for the decisions of the provider that can ultimately shape the literal definition of a consumer base? But in case of WarThunder, there is obviously something wrong. And it's true the reason for it ultimately rests on Gaijin's shoulders. They have the power to shape up what it is to be expected from top tier experience. But WarThunder is not Escape from Tarkov. They don't rely on one-time purchases. While both of these games essentially fall under the live service category of the games, WarThunder has a much bigger responsibility to maintain and cater to its player base. So on one hand, Gaijin advertises their top-of-the-line planes, attract new players to the game, and some of them choose to stay and buy something. And a quick look into the top tier and high tier matches proves that the majority of players are either grinding with the premium plane or they did it to get to the top tier planes. So it creates this hyper-fixation on progression, and when the majority of your player base is progression driven and only experience a certain type of gameplay, it only makes sense for Gaijin to continue on that path that is proven to work instead of trying something more hardcore and realistic. And this decision ends up tailoring the player base into something that is not ready to change, and since Gaijin is so afraid of the community right now, it starts a feedback loop that vouches for whatever it is that makes more silver lions and research points, which equals a smaller maps and higher player count. So as I said, it ultimately falls on Gaijin's shoulders to push the changes and overhaul the top tier experience into something more meaningful and more enjoyable. And I'd suggest them to do it with pure confidence and brute force. I'm sure even those ADHD TikTok brain late Gen Z kids would eventually grow to appreciate a more meaningful approach in the top tier gameplay. Be sure to subscribe and comment down below about what you think Gaijin should do to save the top tier experience. Thanks for watching and be seeing ya.